Hey, let's talk about the real fear almost nobody says out loud when it comes to downsizing. Because most people think the hard part is the packing, the moving, the decluttering, the logistics. And yes, all of that could feel like a lot, but that's actually not the fear that keeps most people stuck. The real fear is what if we make the wrong decision? And that right there, that part, that's the one no one talks about enough. Because when you've been in a home for a long time, downsizing isn't just a move. It feels like a really big life decision. And if you've ever had that quiet little thought in the back of your mind, what if we regret it? Stay with me because in this video, we want to walk you through why fear is so normal, why it keeps so many good people stuck way longer than they need to be, and how to think about this in a way that actually brings some peace and clarity to the whole process. And honestly, this is one of the biggest conversations we have with homeowners right here in Volusia County. Not just should we move, not just can we afford it, not just where would we go. Underneath all of that, there's usually the deeper question. What if we do all of this and then we realize we made a mistake? And if that's where your brain goes, I want you to know something right away. That does not mean you're overthinking it. It means you understand that this matters. Because when people have lived in a home for 15, 20, 25 years or longer, they're not just deciding where to move. They're deciding whether to leave something familiar, something meaningful, something that's been tied to a huge chapter of life. And that's exactly why this fear feels so heavy. Because it's not about square footage, it's about uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for everybody. So let's really get honest for a second. What are people actually afraid of when they think about downsizing? Because fear of downsizing does sound vague. When you break it down, it's usually one of these things. Fear number one, what if we miss our house? And that's a big one. Not because you love mowing the yard or cleaning the extra rooms, but because your house holds life, your memories, your routines, your comfort, your familiarity. You know where everything is. You know how the light hits the kitchen in the morning. You know the sounds, the smells, the little things that nobody else would even notice. And even if the house feels like too much now, it still feels like home. So, of course, part of you wonders, what if we leave and then we miss it? That's real. Fear number two is, what if the next place doesn't feel right? This comes up a lot too, because most people aren't afraid of leaving the old house. They're afraid of choosing the wrong next one. What if it's too small? What if we don't like the layout? What if we miss having a yard? What if we feel boxed in? What if it looks good on paper, but doesn't feel like us? And when people start thinking about all those what ifs, it's very easy to stay where you are, even if where you are doesn't really fit anymore. Number three is, what if we regret the timing? And this is another big one. This one shows up as, what if we should have waited? What if we did this too soon? What if we did it too late? What if we missed the right window? And when people don't feel confident about timing, they tend to default to, well, let's just wait. It sounds safe, but sometimes waiting is actually just fear in a more polite outfit. I say that kindly because I see it all the time. So why does this fear have such a strong hold on people? And why do so many homeowners stay stuck in the thinking about it stage for years? Because fear loves uncertainty. That's really what it comes down to. If you don't know what the next step looks like, if you don't know what your options are, if you don't know what life would feel like after the move, your brain is always going to assume the unknown is riskier than the familiar, even if the familiar isn't really working anymore. And that's such an important thing to understand, because a lot of people think I'm not moving because I'm not ready. But sometimes that's not actually true. Sometimes you're not stuck because you're not ready. Sometimes you're stuck because you don't have enough clarity. And those two things, they're very different. When people get clarity, they usually feel way less afraid, not because every single fear disappears, but because the fear is no longer just floating around in the dark. Now it has a shape. Now it can be looked at. It can be worked through. And that's where progress starts. But there's another layer to this that I think matters even more. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. A lot of people are not just afraid of making the wrong housing decision. They're afraid of what the decision means, and that's deeper. Because downsizing often represents a transition. It's a change in identity, a change in your season of life, a quiet acknowledgement that life is different now than it used to be. And that can be emotional, even when it's a good thing. Because maybe the house you're in right now was the family home. Maybe it was the place where birthdays happened, where holidays happened, where the kids grew up, where the dog ran around in the backyard. That's where life happened for a long time. So when people think about downsizing, what they're sometimes really feeling is this: if we leave this house, are we leaving that version of life behind too? The answer is, in some ways, yes, but that's not a bad thing. That's just what transition is. And I think when people allow themselves to acknowledge that piece of it, they actually start making peace with the decision a lot faster. Because now it's not just about real estate, it's about honoring one chapter while making room for the next one. And that's a very different way to think about it. Now, this is a really important question. How do you know if your fear is actually protecting you or just keeping you stuck? Because not all fear is bad. In fact, sometimes fear is useful. Sometimes it's telling you to slow down, think this through, ask better questions, and that's healthy. But sometimes fear is not protecting you. Sometimes it's just keeping you in a place that no longer fits because it's familiar. That's a huge difference, and there's a simple way to think about it. I mean, ask yourself this: if fear were not making this decision for me, what would I already know? Because a lot of people already know what they think. They already know the house feels too big. They already know the upkeep feels like too much. The stairs are becoming more annoying. The lifestyle no longer fits. They've been imagining something simpler for a while now. They already know. But fear keeps saying, yeah, but what if? And if you're not careful, you can spend years living in what if, and that's not clarity, that's limbo. Limbo is exhausting. So what actually helps people move through this fear in a healthy way? Not pressure, not rushing, not forcing a decision before you're ready. What actually helps is this: clarity, and that's it. Clarity changes everything. Because once people start understanding what their home might allow them to do, what their options really are, what the next chapter could actually look like, what today's local market really means for them, what kind of home would support their lifestyle better, their fear starts to shrink. Not because the decision has become tiny, but because the unknown has become smaller. And that matters so much, because uncertainty is really a lot heavier than reality. That's why thinking about it stage is so draining. You're carrying all the weight of the decision without any of the clarity that would actually help. And this, honestly, is one of the biggest reasons that Cindy and I tell people you do not need to decide everything today. You don't need to know the exact timeline. You don't need to have the perfect nest house picked out. You don't need to have every drawer cleaned out and every memory sorted. You just need to start replacing fear with information, and that is the shift. And once that happens, the whole thing starts to feel much more manageable. And I think this part is really important, because if you're making this decision from a healthy place, downsizing should not feel like panic. It should feel like alignment. It should feel like this makes sense now, not we're being forced into this. It should feel like we're moving towards something that fits our lifestyle better, not we're losing something we can never replace. When people approach downsizing from that place, it changes everything. Because now the move becomes less about fear and more about freedom. Freedom from excess space, freedom from constant upkeep, freedom from a house that no longer supports the life you want to live now. And that's a really beautiful thing when people let themselves see it that way. So if you've been thinking about downsizing and there's this quiet fear in the background saying, what if we make the wrong decision? I want you to know that that fear is incredibly normal, but it does not have to run the show. You don't need to have everything figured out today. You don't need to force a decision before you feel clear, but you also don't have to stay stuck in uncertainty forever. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is not make the move. It's simply get clearer on your options. That's it, just clarity. Now, if you're here in Volusia County and you want help thinking through what that next chapter might look like for you, without pressure, without hype, without anyone trying to sell you on something or panic you into a decision, please reach out, send us a message, give us a call or a text. We're happy to help you think it through in a simple, no nonsense, no pressure way. And hey, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. I'm going to keep making videos just like this to help homeowners like you make smart, low stress decisions about what comes next.